I moved out of my house in a hurry as soon as I turned 18. It was mostly because my family was very disturbing, as my father was out drinking all the time and my stepmom was complaining all the time. It was a very toxic environment, so there was nothing for me there, and no one cared about me, so I just left. And since everything happened so quickly, I didn't think of or plan for my financial security. I did have a job at a local diner, but I wasn't able to save at all from that because I had to buy food for the family, and since I was moving away from that town, I couldn't have that job anymore. So I crashed at an old friend's apartment, all broke and without any source of income. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more juicy content like this. And the problem was that I wasn't very good at anything in particular, except for court tennis. I used to play that when I was in school and was almost a champion, but I stopped playing because of the family. Also, that skill was not going to get me any money unless I played professionally, which was not possible. One day, I was going through the newspaper to see if there was any vacancy advertisement, and the friend whose place I was living at suggested that I shouldn't waste my time on it and find a job I could do well. "Why don't you provide private tennis lessons to a bunch of stay-at-home housewives in the rich neighborhood nearby?" he suggested, and honestly, that was one of the best ideas he ever had. I felt a little embarrassed to not have thought of it first. "That's a great idea," I said, and then we started planning for it. First off, we printed out some posters and flyers with my contact number and set them up in coffee shops and grocery stores around the area that gave out flyers to some of the women asking if anyone was seeking a personal tennis trainer. After that, it was a waiting game. I waited for someone to call me about the poster, but no one did. So I waited for a few days more and still, there was none. I was getting more and more disappointed and sad with each passing day. But then suddenly, after a few days, I got a call from a woman to inquire about the training and the booking. And then I got another call in the next few hours, and another. In the next 2 days, I was booked by 5 rich housewives to train them for court tennis. After we finished discussing the price, I gave them each an appointment, making morning and evening shifts for 5 days, which meant I was supposed to train each woman 2 days a week. I was so happy and overwhelmed that I was finally going to earn some money of my own and get my own apartment soon. So I went to the first house owned by Mrs. Fletcher for the first day as a personal trainer. Her house was huge and so luxurious. There was no doubt that they were loaded. Her water bottle must have been more expensive than my whole outfit. I'm talking about that rich. So I finished up my appointment there after 1.5 hours of training with Mrs. Fletcher. And then, again in the evening, I went to Mrs. O'Neill's house. And their house was even bigger than the first one. And she even tipped me for the evening session. And that was not even in the deal. "Keep it. We have a lot of it," she said when I told her it wasn't necessary. I knew she was showing off, but I kept thinking it must be the way of the rich. After that, I went to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th houses according to the set time, and all the houses were just as rich as the houses I had been to for the training. I don't know what impact seeing all that wealth made on me, but I started having a great desire to acquire that wealth, almost like greed took over me. Yes, I was greedy and thought that it was so unfair that they had all that money and all those luxuries I had never expected to even witness, and I had to work so hard to earn even a little bit of it. So I started plotting ways to trick those women to give me the money. I knew that those women wouldn't take long to fall for an emotional act, so I decided to go with it. For the next week during the training with Mrs. Fletcher, I suddenly pretended to faint in the middle of the game. Mrs. Fletcher came running towards me and tried to wake me up, but I didn't for a couple of minutes. I could tell that she was actually worried as I could hear it in her voice. Then she sprinkled some water on my face and I finally decided to wake up from my fake unconsciousness. After that, she asked me what was wrong and if I was feeling okay. So I pulled up an emotional story to tell her. "I'm having some problems with money, so I've not been eating well. Maybe I got weak because of that," I said. "Oh, poor you," she said and thought for a while and continued speaking. "I know we had a deal to pay you by the end of the week, but let me help you with some for now," she said. So I acted if I was a little uncomfortable, but that was exactly what I had wanted. "I insist," she said, and handed me $250 just because she felt bad for me, which was almost equal to my pay for a week. I was so happy, but I kept it, thanked her, and left. After that, I did the same act with the other 4 women. All of them gave me extra cash. You wouldn't believe it, but Mrs. O'Neill gave me $500, which was almost double my pay. My plan was a huge success, and it worked perfectly. And I had more money than my friend whose place I was in, and I could tell that he was a little jealous. However, I still felt like the money was not enough, and I wanted to get more, way more than that from them. So I thought, since I knew that they were very easy to manipulate emotionally and would do anything for me, if I presented a sob story, I could aim for much more money than $500. For that, I waited a few weeks after my first act because I didn't want them to find my story suspicious. After that, I went with the same pattern. On the first training session of the week, which was with Mrs. Fletcher, I suddenly burst out crying in the middle of the training and sat down on the court. So she came to me and asked me what was wrong. At first, I just told her that I didn't want to burden her with my stressful personal life, which made her want to talk about it more. So I told her that my little sister was in the hospital. My mom called me this morning to inform me that she was seriously ill. She's just a teen and has no health insurance, and we have no other way to save her life. Even the hospital is requesting to take her somewhere else because we're poor, I said, and started crying even more. "Oh, you poor thing," she said after hearing what I said, but I wasn't done. "I cannot save her life because I have no money. I failed as a big brother," I added to make it more emotional and a little dramatic. She just looked at me with pity and sympathy. Meanwhile, I was pretty sure that my act would have won me an Oscar if that was a movie. So after a while, I stopped crying and calmed down. Then Mrs. Fletcher got up and asked me to go inside with her. At that moment, I got a little scared, thinking maybe she caught on to my lie and was calling the police or something. But she didn't. Instead, she took me to the room where her safe was and asked me how much money I needed. I told her I remembered my mother mentioning tens of thousands. "Okay, I'll give you $50,000. Use what you need and return the rest, and we'll find some other way for you to repay," she said, and handed me the $50,000 in cash. And that was only the beginning, because I played the same card with the other women, and they also fell for my sob story and provided me $50,000 each in cash to save the life of my ill sister, who didn't even exist. After collecting the money from all of them and promising them that I would repay in some way, I had $250,000 in total. So after collecting the last of the money, I ran away from that place to a city far away from there the same night. I realized that what started as a simple con had now turned into a crime, as I had not taken just a few dollars, but thousands of dollars by tricking the women. It could send me to jail, I thought, and decided to do something about it. So the very next day, I went to a plastic surgeon, saying I wanted to look more handsome. Change my nose and jawline, and also the lips. I want to look more handsome, no matter how much it costs, I said, and the doctor agreed to do it for $35,000. So I prepared for the surgery, and in a period of 4 months, all my surgeries were complete, and I recovered in 2 months after that. After that, I colored and styled my hair differently. Then I went to the shady part of town where all the illegal stuff goes on to buy myself a new identity. So I spent $5,000 more to buy a new name, new identification, and driver's license. I had already changed my number before anything else, so I was all set to start a new life with a lot of money. So I bought a new apartment and started looking for business ideas because I knew that the money was not going to last long if I just spent it. One day, I was just watching the TV and changing channels when I noticed something. There was my picture in one of the news channels under the title Wanted. It was my old face, but it still shocked me for a bit. Then, I listened to the news more carefully. "This man tricked the concerned husband's wives into giving him a huge sum of money," it said. Oh, so the husbands found out? I thought because it had already been 6 months and the women had done nothing. So maybe the husbands were the one to file a complaint after finding out. But that was not it. They had even set a reward for the person who was going to give them a proper lead. I was a little concerned, but then I remembered that I looked nothing like the old me anymore, and I changed everything for good. However, I didn't stop keeping up with the news as I wanted to know what and how much they knew about me. And the same day on the news, it came out that they knew about the city I was hiding in. I was scared out of my mind. So I quickly packed up my things and the money and headed out to go somewhere else. I drove for about 2 hours and then got tired, so I stopped at a roadside motel. I took a room there to sleep for the night, but then suddenly, in the middle of the night, I heard a knock at the door. I thought it must be some drunk who got confused about the rooms, but they kept on knocking, which was very irritating. So I got up from the bed and walked towards the door to tell them off. But when I opened the door, I got the shock of my life. There were 2 policemen outside the door who quickly arrested me as soon as I opened the door. "What are you doing? I have done nothing," I screamed and struggled, but they just read me my rights and took me to the station. In the station, I saw all the women that I had taken money from with their husbands, and they looked at me strangely as I walked in. I was still insisting that the police must be wrong since I had done nothing. "Cut out the act, boy. We know exactly who you are and what you did," one of the policemen said and took me inside the cell. It was clear to me that they had figured out everything about me, and I kept on wondering how since no one knew about me. I had given the surgeon and the guy who made my new identity enough money to shut their mouth, and I was sure they wouldn't come out and talk, as they would be criminally liable too. Then who was it, I thought, and kept thinking for hours. I didn't have to wait long after that, since the guy who was responsible for my arrest came in to claim the reward money, and I would have never been able to guess who it was. It was the friend I was crashing with at the beginning of everything. He came to me and told me that he did it all for the money. "If you had given me some money before you left, it wouldn't have come to this," he said, and just laughed at my condition. I was so mad that I wanted to punch his face, but I wanted to know how he found out about me, so I asked him. He told me that he had no idea what was going on at first, about why I ran all of a sudden, but then he saw the news and about how I had taken a lot of money. Then he saw that there was a reward to find me. So he checked his phone and looked for an app that we had used in the past to share locations and found out that I hadn't turned off the location sharing setting. And that was how he figured out all the places I had ever been to throughout my run and my exact location. "I knew you went to a plastic surgeon to get a new look and a new identity, so I presented it all to the police, and now you are behind bars and I have money," he said, and left with a sass. I felt so bad and foolish for having forgotten about that app completely and about not buying a new phone after changing my number. After that, the police made me return all that was left of the money, and I was sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, I made sure that I kept some money hidden safely for the time I got out of jail. Thanks for watching. Has anyone ever tricked you into giving them money? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.